Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello, and welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and today I'm here with Beth McDaniel. Hi, Beth. How are you?
Hi, Angela. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. So Beth is a really amazing and different kind of guest because she's going to bring so much expertise to the table today on climate change and just the cool things that she's doing. She's a serial entrepreneur. So I'm going to read you her bio because I am just fascinated with her journey. So Beth McDaniel, JD, is a founder and president of the award-winning paint and coatings company, Reactive Surfaces, where she also serves as legal counsel. She is also a partner in McDaniel and Associates, a law firm specializing in patent and trade secret law. Her legal practice is focused on contracts, business administration, innovation, and entrepreneurship. As a serial entrepreneur, she has guided this bleeding-edge innovation company, operating in the paint and coatings and specialty chemicals industries for the past 15 years. She has served in leadership roles for numerous organizations, including serving as a Pathways to Peace Fellow, a premier justice organization. Her work in the area of human rights and social justice brings a level of experience and intention to ensure that any climate solution has at its heart environmental justice and enhancement of human rights and personal livelihood. She brings the same dedication to her family, including her 2 children and grandchildren. That's amazing. So you're doing all the things that I said I wanted to do when I grew up, but I didn't. And so I love that you're an attorney. I love that you're focused on social justice and climate change and making the world a better place. And then you're also protecting people's rights to their own information through patents and trade laws. And I mean, there's just so much about this that I'm fascinated with. So welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So I want to start by asking what got you involved? What led you down the path of law? Why did you want to become an attorney?
I wish I could say that it was this long held, fantasy of mine as a child to being a lawyer. I didn't have any lawyers in my family. I was the first one.
Yeah.
No, I just fell into it as people do. My job was ending. I was in my mid-20s. It's my early 20s. And I was working after I'd gone to college and gotten a finance degree. And I thought I was going to go into banking or finance or something, which I hated when I tried it out. And instead, but I just took a job like working at a company in kind of business administration. And that job was kind of ending and they were selling off the businesses and the properties. And so I was either going to make a lateral move like into the accounts payable department or something, or go ahead and do something else. And I thought I could apply to law school, and then I got into one that I had never heard of. I was living in Houston and I got into South Texas College of Law, which is actually a very good private law school, but I wasn't familiar with it. And I had that kind of Groucho Marx reaction, like what kind of college would want me?
Yeah.
What kind of law school is this that would want me? And so, and I ended up going and it was great. And I love being a lawyer. I love having that education. It wasn't even really the right law school for me. It was more of a litigation. They produce a lot of litigators, and I ended up in business law.
Wow. Okay.
Transactional stuff. And that made more sense for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. So you're in law school and you decide to go into, you said business. And so you're doing patents and trademarks, and it's a really fascinating area because it's really tough. Like it's a really tough industry, just figuring out all the nuances that make somebody's mark unique, and that, and then having to follow that through all the way to the USPTO and how does that process work? Do you find that to
Okay,
be?
well, I'm going to make a little bit of a correction in that assumption, because first of all, it was not linear to go from
Oh.
school to the law firm that I'm practicing in now.
Oh.
There's a lot of stuff that happened between that, but we can talk about that or not. But just to clear it up, I'm not a patent attorney.
Okay.
I've done trademarks and stuff like that. To be a patent attorney, you have to have a science background. So it's one of
Oh,
the
interesting.
specializations in law is patent. And it makes sense when you think about it. You know, you would want them to be either an engineer or a scientist if they're making patents for those kind of things. They got to understand the underlying, discipline of what it is that they're patenting. And so, yeah, I'm not that. I've done some other IP law. Now I do practice and help, our company with trade secrets and that kind of thing. My husband is a patent attorney.
Oh,
and
neat. Okay.
Yeah, he's a biochemist and a lot of other different kind of sciences. He's very sciencey, I say.
Yeah.
And so he started the patent law firm. I came into this firm.
Okay, very cool. Well, that's neat because I think that you guys are like the dynamic duo then, right? Because you can kind of do
We
anything.
support each other. We supplement each other.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. So then you go and you become an entrepreneur from law, right? So did you started law first and then became an entrepreneur? Is that how?
I would say entrepreneurship has been in me kind of all my life, because
Really?
my dad was a chemist also in
Okay.
Houston, like Ship Channel area, and but he always had side businesses. We always had businesses, real estate or a house or something that we were keeping up and renting out. And I guess I just kind of always knew that side of things, and so we were always running some little business on the side, some family thing. And whether I liked it or not, it gave me that kind of background. So the entrepreneurial stuff came a little bit easier. And also I never really worked for a lot of big companies or big law firms. That wasn't my gig either. I didn't dig showing up at a designated time every day and wearing all the right clothes and stuff like that. So entrepreneurship suited me personality wise more, do my own thing and do it on my own hours and all of that. So
yeah, I can relate to that. I usually say I'm unemployable. Please don't employ me because I'll definitely get fired. I'm not the person that you want to have.
Well, the only people I always say about our family is the only people that would employ us is each other. Yeah. And I work with my family. Not only do I work with my husband and we've started a company, but excuse me, I also work with my brother and my sister and my parents. When they were
wow, that's awesome.
We all had businesses together and still do.
That's awesome. So then you move into the environmental sector. So were you always passionate about sustainability? Was this just did you have a moment where you're like, hey, I need to make a difference? Did you come across a product? Like, how did this work when you moved into the paint coat, the coatings? And tell me a little bit about that business.
Yeah. So the company that Steve and I have, my husband and I have, is in the paint and coatings innovation space. And I usually have to explain this because I always say paint and coatings is the biggest industry that no one ever thinks about.
Right.
It's true. It's, it's prolific. There are billions and billions of dollars every year because everything is coated in its manufacturing process at some point. Okay. And so wherever you are, look around your room, look at everything. So you of course, we know the walls are coated with paint. And a paint is the same thing as a coating, but with color. Okay. And a coating is there to protect the underlying surface. Mm-hmm. And so everything is coated. So if I'm looking at you in the back, like that coffee cup you just lifted up has coating, mm-hmm. Your clothing has coating, your computer screen, your eyeglasses, everything around you at some point in its manufacturing process. And to us, that's just surface area that we have to work with. And what our company has done is add a third dimension to that, and that's functionality. So we want our paints to function, to react to their environment in some sort of way that's helpful. For instance, antimicrobial. Now, we're not the first antimicrobial paint. There are other smart coatings out there that have a functionality like that, but ours is the first that uses bio-based materials that are naturally non-toxic in the paint to achieve that kind of functionality that like antimicrobial on a surface for lasting antimicrobial. It's not like spraying Lysol on, which is a disinfectant that works one time. This would be continually working in a coating system to keep a surface free from microbes.
Okay.
Coronavirus or something like that. So that's the basis of what we've been doing for about 20 years. And then we got kicked in the head with a steel-toed boot in 2018 when the IPCC report came out about that's the UN's International Panel on Climate Change.
Okay.
And their report came out about climate change and where we were at that point and what we needed to do. And it was shocking. And it floored us, especially Steve. I mean, my husband thinks he can solve any problem in the world. And he was like, I don't know how I'm going to protect you from this.
Wow.
And so he sat on the couch for about a week and we talked about it a lot. And then he had an idea that he had been considering from some other research that he had done in the Arctic, because he's also a space enthusiast and wants to find life on Mars. And so he's done a lot of like Martian simulations in different places on Earth. One of them is the Arctic. And then while he was there one time, way back, he saw something and it just stuck in his mind. And what it was it was rock. It was covered with what he thought was red paint. Wasn't paint. It was lichen, but it looked like paint. And he thought it was like a GPS marker or something like that, but it looked like paint. And he was like, what is that? Well, we've all seen lichen, you go hiking, right. You see it on rocks. You can't pick it off really. I mean, it sticks to and it's colorful, right? You see all different colors. They can grow up next to each other. Well, that's because lichen the reason why it has different colors, it has different kinds of algae in it. And I'm getting to a point here, but, and lichen is composed of two organisms, algae that photosynthesize and fungi that support the algae in its photosynthesis. Like, for instance, letting it get sunlight, but not too much UV, helping it absorb water that it needs for photosynthesis. And photosynthesis pulls down CO2, as you remember from 8th grade biology. And releases oxygen. So Steve looked at that and he thought, that's a lot like a paint. It's got color. It adheres well to the surface. Let's take a look at that. What if we cut into a lichen and see what it looks like? And so we did that. We saw what it looked like, and we designed a paint that pulls down CO2. And if you cut it down in the middle of it, if you could slice it down and look at it through a microscope, what you'd see is very similar to the way that lichen is structured with fungus and algae. We have algae, but the paint part that we do is kind of like fungus that supports the algae.
Interesting.
And it pulls out CO2, so it's a climate change solution. It's a carbon dioxide removal technology.
Wow. So what can you put this on? Can you put this on anything, or is this like a paint? How does this actually adhere?
So, okay, yeah, great question. What it is it's not the typical paint that you would think about. It's completely non-toxic. In fact, it's made of ingredients that you can eat. Okay.
Oh, wow.
In your biscuit today. Okay. They are things that like absorb water and give moisture, make your biscuits taste real moist. Well, anyway, that's what we use to make this paint. So it's not a typical paint that you would see on your walls, although we are planning to develop that as well. Okay. But this is a paint that would be put into a module, and we put these into a terrarium-like situation so we can control the environment, and we can put as much painted surface area in a module to do the work of photosynthesis as possible. So we can take advantage of the fact that you can hang sheets vertically because paint adheres well, right? And so you go vertical, we can stack up modules. Anyway, we can get a lot more done in a footprint than a tree could, for instance. We can measure it molecule by molecule as well. So I could get into a lot of the science, but basically what we're proposing, the highest and best use for this right now is a paint that would be in a module that we could densify as much as possible to do as much of the photosynthetic work as possible, because the problem is so huge and it's so urgent that it's not as good as painting on the surface of your house, but that will come too. That's just worse.
Okay. Wow. Well, that's amazing that you guys have developed this technology. I think that that's outstanding. I mean, we need more solutions, to combat climate change. And, we were just for the show just mentioning the fires in Maui that are happening, and, the droughts that we're dealing with, and there's just so much going on, and we need to start problem solving. We've let it go for way too long. So I think
we're
that's outstanding.
Big points that we don't want to pass up. Like, we don't want the Great Barrier Reef to die.
Right. Exactly.
Well, it is. We'll do something soon, along with all the other coral reefs. But yeah, I don't want to be, Debbie Downer here.
Yeah. Well, so what's being done on the international government space that's making an impact, do you think?
Well, I mean, there's all sorts of emission control, regulations, and countries are taking big steps, and we want them to. Unfortunately, there's two things that need to happen. Emissions need to go down, as well as carbon dioxide needs to be pulled from the air.
Yeah.
And so ours falls more in the pulling from the air side. Okay. We can pull from an industrial point source too. If an industry is emitting CO2, we can pipe that into our modules and capture that CO2. It only makes our system work better, right? Because what do plants and algae love? CO2.
Right.
So we can use ours. Our system is adaptable to different situations, but we need both. Generally, globally, what we need is we need to reduce emissions, and we also have to pull down CO2, or we're going to pass up those tipping points.
All right. Well, that's fascinating. So when you started going down this journey, did you have any major obstacles in terms of policies and governmental regulations that you had to go around? And if so, how did you do that?
We don't have a lot of policies that we have to go around. I mean, the big obstacle for us is always money. Okay. No one is paying us to develop this. Okay. What we do in our business is we license technology. We develop technology and we license. Usually it's some paint company coming to us and saying, hey, we need a paint that does this functionality. Can you develop that for us? We develop it for them, and then we license that to them, and they manufacture and distribute it. Okay. That's our business model. But sometimes we innovate not knowing if there's going to be a buyer. So we always need money to come in at some point, because, we're just carrying climate change on our backs right now. So we can use some help, but no, and we're getting help, and there's a lot of experts that are helping us but there's always, we always need money. That's the biggest obstacle. But given what we're utilizing the nature of the ingredients and all that, we don't face regulatory with what we're doing. There's really, we don't even have to construct anything.
Really?
And we're not, a lot of these CDR or carbon dioxide removal technologies inject that CO2, that carbon down into the ground. And that means going down like 2 miles into the ground. Okay? And that's a huge deal with its own risks. We don't put our CO2 to bed that way. Okay. We have other means of doing that don't involve that. I won't get into it because it's just, too detailed, but we avoid that, because that would be a very heavy regulated thing too. And it should be.
Yeah. So do you find that companies are open to having this discussion? Is it a difficult discussion to have? Is it, where does that line get drawn with corporations who say, I'm interested in doing well, I want to do good for the world, but also profitability, right? So where do you find that those conversations are difficult to have with big corporations or governmental entities?
Yeah. Yes, but there definitely seems to be a trend of them wanting to do good. Like we're talking to some of the in the steel industry. The steel industry is an emitter that can't really abate their emissions. Okay, there's no real way to get around it, and so that's called a hard to abate industry. And so what they're doing is they're turning to carbon dioxide removal, and they are very interested, in doing something to help. Now, they're very interested, I'm not just talking about the steel industry, generally companies, corporations are interested in doing something so long as it doesn't cost them too much money, right?
Right. Exactly.
Which when you're talking about existential things, you're like, okay, we're talking about our existence here,
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have been hit usually when we talk about this with, in fact, like what we were talking to one of the biggest computer companies in the world. If you guessed it, I mean, if I gave you one guess, you'd probably guess it.
Yeah.
And their sustainability officer, and they had only one question for us, and that was, what's the ROI?
Wow.
And
Wow.
it was a little offensive, of
Yeah,
course.
like what is a life cost? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
What is it?
crazy.
Someone's got a gun to your head and you're like, oh, it's going to be $300 for you to pull the gun off. No, I'm not worth that.
Yeah.
But and the answer is great. Okay. Our ROI, our business model for this technology is very good. So we had a good answer for the ROI, but it's just a little offensive that that's always the first thing.
Right. For somebody whose main job is supposed to be doing right for sustainability, right? Doing well for affecting climate change and impacting our environment. So that's disappointing, but I get it. Yeah. So and it's a shame because I feel the same thing happens with DEI. DEI, everybody has this great initiative. We want women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses, and we're going to make it a real priority. But the fact is, sometimes it costs more money to do business with a small business or a woman-owned business or a minority-owned business, because we're not a giant billion-dollar corporation who, has their overhead is very different. It doesn't. We're not able to get the cost savings that they are. So, when we bring our proposal to the table, even if we're talking to somebody who's in charge of DEI for a corporation, like, oh, wow, yeah, you're much more expensive. And I'm like, well, yeah. So it's kind of that same thing of like, do you really want to impact, or are you just saying it? Are you just checking a box? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, sustainability, DEI, all of these initiatives that corporations do, they want to put a person in the role, but they don't want to put money behind that. They don't want to put money where their mouth is. So it's a shame. It's a shame. So how can we do better as individuals? What can we as individuals do better to impact climate change and to minimize our carbon footprint?
Well, I think what we do is you keep on doing what you're doing, I mean,
Yeah.
people recycle and they get solar panels and they drive electric cars if possible. And all of that is good. Okay. Unfortunately, none of it is going to get us there.
Yeah.
And so we have to also think bigger. I mean, you don't want to take away from that. You want to keep that up because you don't want the problem to get even bigger. But we have to take big steps, and just the numbers work out that way.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those is that we need more carbon removal. So I will plug this generally. And I consider other competitors in our field as colleagues, because we're all after the same thing, and there is plenty of CO2 to go around. Okay.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so, but just the fact, like I said, there's the emissions, there's reducing emissions, but then there's also, we have to add in this piece, because even if we were to reach those emissions goals, which we won't at all, they're going the wrong way, the trajectory is the wrong way. But even if we were, then we still need carbon dioxide removal according to the numbers. Okay. And what we need is to be pulling down, the numbers vary, but I think the IPCC said by 2030, we need to be pulling down like 6 billion tons or something like that a year.
Wow.
And I'll tell you where we are right now today is, of all the technologies that are direct air capture, pulling down CO2 and not emitting more CO2 than they're pulling down. Okay.
Yeah, that's a big thing, right?
That we're only at 4,000.
Wow. And we need to get to 6 billion.
in just a few years.
Wow.
So what I would suggest to those who are interested is pick up the phone and call your lawmaker and tell them we need more carbon dioxide removal technologies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Support that. That's important.
Yeah, because you're right. I mean, we're so far from that benchmark, so far. Wow.
And we will eventually have also these modules that I mentioned to you. Because they're modular, these are 1 meter cube modules that we're building these things in right now. And within them, they have more, painted surface area than 1 meter squared on the ground. But eventually we'll have the individual modules that you could have at home. You could be pulling down your own CO2.
Wow.
So we don't have that on the market yet, but we're going towards that. And so we are hoping that everyone will be able to pull some of their own weight.
So how do you scale? How do you scale what you're doing right now? I know financially, but like what type of, how do you make what you're doing pivotal and impactful in a way that is going to meet our needs? And how do you scale to that great, I mean, that's massive.
Well, one thing we're doing is we entered our technology into the X Prize carbon removal technology contest. Are you familiar with X Prize?
I'm not, no.
Yeah, so X Prizes, there's a lot of X Prizes. X Prizes are given to stimulate technology in a certain field that involves like solving some sort of existential problem, poverty, clean water, food scarcity, just things like that. And there's a carbon removal X Prize. It was sponsored by Elon Musk. I think he did it in 2020. The prize is to be given away in 2025 on Earth Day to the best technology, given you have to pull down 1,000 tons of CO2 and all this stuff. It's $100 million prize purse.
Wow.
Biggest prize ever given. And so that's one thing we're trying to do to get our technology out there. And in meeting the requirements for the X Prize to win the X Prize, that really showcases the technology. So it's not the tail wagging the dog. I mean, we're in it, but if we can show we can pull down 1,000 tons, that's what we need to do to scale. Someone needs to come and amplify what we've done. I mean, we invented the paint, and the paint can be in a lot of different ways. It's kind of a Swiss Army knife, if you will call it. It can be used, like I said, for industrial emissions to pull those down. It can be used in direct air. We have an ocean embodiment that would actually put oxygen into the ocean. And there's different ways. I mean, we got the paint. We can use it in a lot of ways, putting these things in your home, developing an architectural coating. We got the paint, but we got to see. So we definitely, like you said, need the money. But we're building a pilot plant as well right now in Tracy, California.
Okay.
And so coming out of the lab and putting it in a plant, and that will demonstrate it both for the X Prize as well as for the just business in general. Will demonstrate the direct air capture capabilities.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. So I want to pivot kind of briefly to talk about being a woman in this type of industry. I mean, I imagine it's fairly rare to have a woman in this scientific, kind of environmental sustainability. What is that like? Do you find it to be challenging? Do you find it to be easier? Are people willing to listen? I mean, tell me what that's like being a female executive in this industry.
Well, as an executive, that might be a little bit more rare. We have more female scientists, I think, in our labs than male. So I think sciences are definitely, and I'm not a scientist, so it's hard for me to speak to that, but we definitely see a lot of female presence in the lab. Our chief scientific officer is a female too. And but as president, people are like, oh, she's president. They're like, so I did kind of just marry the inventor
Well,
there will be better presidents than me, okay, that come to that will, and I'll move over into probably the social justice space is where I'll probably land, and I'll always be a director of the company. But yeah, I mean, I think that it hasn't been as hard being a woman as it has been kind of working with my husband. That's been an obstacle.
yeah.
I know you were trying to get into the women's space, but as a couple, whenever we go to meetings, we just look like Ma and Pa Kettle, it makes us look automatically kind of small. So that has been a little bit of an obstacle, but I wish I could speak more to that. I mean, I think I haven't felt that much difference being a woman, but
Good, good. Well, that's great. I think that's fantastic.
I'm often the only woman in the room. Yeah. I guess I'm used to that. I did land development for a long time too, and that was the same thing. And I guess I just got used to it.
Yeah, I understand that. I know I'm typically the only woman in the room for the security. I own a security company, and so similar, but it doesn't faze me. It doesn't bother me. I'm okay with it. Like, I wish there were more women, but I'm not uncomfortable being the only woman in the room, because I've learned that's just the way it's going to be. And I either need to get comfortable with it, or I need to change industries. And I'm not changing industries, and I'm not get comfortable with it. So
I can run me off of anything, but
yeah.
And I definitely used it to my advantage in ways. I love to be underestimated. I love it when people think that I'm stupid or not on, because that's the easiest way to just, sneak in on a collateral attack.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I definitely think I've been underestimated.
Mm-hmm. So with girls who are coming up through sciences and who have a passion for this, what advice would you give them in terms of, like, how do you go into a career in climate change and sustainability?
Well, call me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And generally do that. I mean, in my life, I don't know if I can speak to how you get a job in this area, besides that, but I guess when I was, in my life, and I've lived for a long time, so a lot of the stuff is starting to come together for me now, but
Right.
when I'm passionate about something, I found a way to get involved. That's how I got involved in human rights. Is I just, I found out that there was still genocide happening in the world, and I was like, no way, not on my watch. I got to do something about this, and I just found a way. Found some organizations that were doing what I could see being a part of, and so I would say do that. If you can't, you might try to get a job in that field, but if you can't, or if that doesn't suit your schedule or whatever, or your skill set, go find a job. I mean, go volunteer, take an active role in something, and then you might find it through there also. I mean, a lot of my stuff as I've gotten older has kind of just come together. The human rights stuff is coming together with the climate change stuff, because frankly, with the climate change problem that we're expecting, if we stay on the trajectory that we're on, there's going to be a lot of migration, a lot of civil unrest. There's going to be a lot more viruses, for instance. I mean, we have no idea really what the impacts are going to be, but there's going to be human rights implicated. And so I never knew that my job and my affectation would come together in that way, but they did.
Yeah. Well, and if you're passionate about something, do it for free. And that's what I always say. I love that you said volunteer and get involved, because if you love something so much, go do it for free until it turns paid, right? Because if you're doing it for free, that's showing your passion. It's putting you in front of the right people. It's giving you the right experience. And, I can't say this enough, that some of those paid things, or some of the free things that you're doing, the volunteer work, that shows your commitment to a cause, right? And an employer, that speaks volumes.
Yeah. And not only that, even it can also give meaning to what you're doing. If you can't at that moment go get your dream job, then it kind of gives meaning to your life. And it really is all one big package anyway, your work and your life and all of that. And so if you just kind of add it in, your passion, wherever you add it in, just do it. Because it could make your work life and your family life more better, not more
Right.
better.
Well, and I think that's where also things click, right? So if you're out cleaning up the beaches, for example, and finding plastic in the ocean and getting the nets out of the ocean, I mean, there's so many opportunities to go and help. You might come up with that one solution, like your husband did. He came up with that one thing, like how do we do better? How do we make an impact? And he figured it out, because the need is great, and when you're involved with it and when you are actively finding solutions, that's when your brain starts to click in and say, okay, we're going to figure this out. This is a problem. We're natural problem solvers. We're going to try to figure this out.
And figure it out in a way that suits you as a person. Like when I went into the human rights space, I mean, I got involved with an organization where, I mean, these are the most amazing people. And I was very intimidated by a lot of people that were going across the globe, living in refugee camps with these people, training them to do different things, really helping on the ground. They were nurses. And I had young kids. I was a lawyer. I'm rooted. I'm not a travel to other side of the world kind of person anyway. And, or I am the travel person. I'm just not the go live person.
Yeah.
And, I thought, you know what? I need to figure out what a housewife, working mom can do to support this cause. And I was a lawyer. And so what I decided was, well, first of all, I think I need to build awareness for the cause in my community. So I started presenting to classrooms, and I started organizing classrooms to do different, like really fun art projects and stuff like that citywide. And then I started, and I taught advocacy because I'm a lawyer. And so I taught them how to stand up and tell their lawmakers what they want. It was my stick it to the man class.
Yeah.
Teaching high schoolers and going into lawmakers' offices and stuff like that. And so I figured out what I could do is my point, give parameters. And there's something you can do given your parameters and your skill set and, your expertise.
Yeah, I agree. We all have special talents. Different types of availability, skill sets. I mean, I love that, because there's so much that can be done. We don't have to do what everybody else is doing, right? Like that's not going to work. We don't need everybody doing the exact same thing. We need everybody using their own special skills and talents and availability to do what you can do.
That's exactly right. That's how I felt. Mm-hmm.
So tell me, part of this podcast, we talk about giving your power away. And I know you seem like a really powerful, charismatic person. So I know that this is probably rare for you, but I think that as women, we do this frequently. Have you ever given your power away in a certain situation and then had to take that power back in a different situation? Like, you've sat in a board meeting and let somebody, kind of talk over you and take credit for something, or you've allowed somebody else to take that power away from you, and then you've had to step back into your power.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah. So I think it's a natural, we'll pull back versus, fight for it sometimes. But I think
just kind of learn from it every time, I mean, I used to work for my brother, and he had, or I was kind of a general counsel for him, and we work great together, and I adore him. He's like my husband. He's just entrepreneurial and innovator, and I just kind of followed along and tried to keep him honest on everything, and sweep up where he needed me to, but just keep that mind going where it was going, because he's so brilliant in that way. But I mean, if he said something harsh or whatever, it might really, like, it would sap me of power. I mean, I never thought of it like that, but yeah, it would sap me of power for, and I remember there were moments when he called me down, or maybe in front of other people or whatever, and it just sapped me in my power for months, or for in a certain area for even ever, and so, yeah, you got to pull that back and say, even if they were right about you, I mean, sometimes you just got to be like, okay, well, I won't screw that up again then.
Right. Yeah, I understand. So who inspires you?
Wow. Gosh, so many people. my husband is an inspiration to me. I mean, he is
Yeah.
probably one of the most brilliant minds in biotech today, and innovation especially. So he's always innovating.
Mm-hmm.
And if where I am really in the present, and maybe he's not as much, he is a forward thinker, and so that kind of helps us in business. Is he's always thinking about where are we going with this, and big picture items, and not
Yeah.
afraid to in the world and the biggest problems there are.
Yeah.
So he inspires me all the time. And but I mean, I had good people around me, business wise. I had great people. My dad was a great businessman, man of very few words, and just super wise and super kind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there are, because I'm so attached to the human rights space, and that's so important to me, there are certain leaders in that space um, that really made an impact on me, that did just amazing things. Like one of them was I used to be a fellow in a fellowship called the Carl Wilkins
Okay.
Fellowship. And Carl Wilkins was the last remaining American in Rwanda during the genocide in Rwanda in the 1990s.
Wow.
And he and his family had been living there. He's just kind of regular guy, like, you would be your friend, I mean, you would just know this guy, right? And he sent his family away, and he was like the Hotel Rwanda guy. In fact, I think he knew him. And
Wow.
he rescued whole orphanages. He rescued neighbors and families and all sorts of things. And he did it in just the most humble of ways. And he utilized what he had, because as a white man in Rwanda at that time, he could go talk to lawmakers and stuff like that. He was a negotiator.
Yeah.
And he stayed there and put his life at risk, knowing that, though, that he could bring, hopefully really negotiate with some of these people that were carrying out these acts. And he did. And
Wow.
so, yeah, he was a big inspiration to me.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. So, with all that you've done and all that you've accomplished, I mean, you've done so much in your adult life. Did you foresee that this was going to be your path at 18? And what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self? I mean, you've accomplished so much.
Gosh, I was a hot mess at 18.
Right.
I didn't even know it. I mean,
I think we all are.
I was just stupid. And no, I never would have really thought that I'd have done anything like this. I wasn't even contemplating law school. I thought that I would be in business, and I was always involved with people. Okay. I always like mentored and did big brothers and big sisters and mentored young kids and stuff like that. So I kept in touch with that side of myself, because it was just important to me to be living that at all points in my life, to a certain degree. And then, but yeah, at that time I was just partying.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to 18-year-old you?
Ooh, okay. Calm down. You don't have to get all the partying in. And live your passion. Find your skills and try to exploit those skills. But if you don't have any skills, because I was like that, I had general intelligence probably, but not really any great skill set. I worked at a grocery store, in high school, and I waited tables in college. And I'm not saying those aren't careers; those are fine. But but all of that added to what I eventually was able to do. So don't feel bad about it. Like, take whatever job, and, be looking forward also, and see what you want to do. But you're getting experience no matter what you're doing.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and yeah, you don't have to have it all figured out at 18, right?
I have an 18-year-old. He kind of does have it all figured out.
Really? That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, he just always had a passion for what he's doing. And so,
yeah. Well, and having parents like you and your husband probably doesn't hurt, right? He's probably exposed to much more in his life, just two very passionate people who are out there making a difference globally. This is huge for not just, your community, but globally. So that's amazing. So I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm cheering for you all the way because I just love what you're doing. And I just want to see you guys succeed so much, and best of luck on this award that you're going after. So what advice, or what do you wish more people knew?
What do I wish more people knew? I wish they knew, I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I wish they really understood the urgency of climate change. I mean, we have less than 10 years to meet some really important milestones. And I mean, I have stuff sitting on my desk that's probably 10 years old. It's not that time to make some really big changes. And so I really hope that people start taking it seriously, start giving it a priority. And when I say people, I think individuals are thinking that, but the ones that really need to do it are the corporations and the countries.
Right. Individually. Yeah.
And we have to push them. They work for us.
Right. Well, and we pay with our, we elect who we're going to have with our money, right? So if you want a corporation to do what you want them to do, stop buying their products until they figure it out, right? And so if
you're a shareholder, speak up. And that's what's happening with a lot of the big companies. The shareholders are taking a very strong stand, and they're not going to put up with this shit anymore. They're like, you need to cut back on your emissions.
Yes.
You need to do something about that. It's a business expense. I think what businesses don't consider is, and I'm talking about big business doesn't consider, is they're like, well, that doesn't, that cuts into our profit too much or whatever. And you know what? Cleaning up your carbon dioxide mess is part of your business expense. That's the way I see it. So you're going to have to cut into your profits a little bit. That's just, doing business.
Absolutely. And they need to help, be held to it and be fined if they're not. And that's the other thing, is that we're not holding them accountable enough. So
lots to do in business.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Beth McDaniel. You are just such an inspiration, and I've really learned so much, and I am rooting for you and really hoping that you make the impact that I know that you can make. So we just need to get behind you and make sure that you have all the resources that you need. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed myself. Thanks for great questions too.
Thank you. So how can people find you?
Well, we are Team Lichen in the X Prize if you're looking for us.
Okay.
And LICHEN, Team Lichen. And our company is Reactive Surfaces. That's like surface of a table, not services. And you can look and you can see all of our technologies, or we call them platform technologies in there, including carbon capture coatings.
Okay.
And then I'll give you my link.
All right. I appreciate it. And you can also find Beth McDaniel on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. We will make sure to have her full bio and all of her links on there as well. So thank you so much for joining me for another episode today. I hope you learned a lot as I have. And Beth, again, thank you so much for all of your time and your expertise today. I've really enjoyed it. So I hope everyone has the most amazing day ever.
Thank you for joining our guests on the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And we hope you've gained new insight and learned from exceptional women. Remember to subscribe or check out this and all episodes on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Visit us next time, and until then, step into your own power.